Some nights don't end when the music stops. They follow you, quietly, until the day everything comes back to collect its debt. I didn't expect that night to find me again, not here, not like this. The ballroom was drowning in gold light and polite laughter, crystal glasses clinking under chandeliers worth more than my entire life 3 years ago, and yet all I could think about was the time. 6:42 p.m., because if I stayed any longer, I'd be late. Another drink, the man beside me insisted, already signaling the server before I could answer. I gave a small, practiced smile and gently pushed the glass back. I'm sorry, I can't. I have to pick up my kid. The words slipped out naturally, something I had learned to say without hesitation, without fear, until the air behind me shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But I felt it, like the room itself had gone still. Then came the voice. Low, even, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten before my mind could catch up. A kid. My fingers froze around the edge of the table. Slowly, I turned, already knowing what I would see and still hoping I was wrong. Dominic Viral stood just a few feet away, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, his presence cutting through the room without effort. 3 years hadn't softened him. If anything, he looked sharper, more controlled, like a blade that had been refined instead of dulled. His eyes settled on me, steady and unreadable, and for a moment, the noise of the entire ballroom faded into nothing. Long time no see, he said. Just 4 words. Calm. Casual. Like we were strangers. Like I hadn't once belonged to him in a way I had never belonged to anyone else. I forced myself to breathe, to straighten, to become someone else, the version of me that had survived the past 3 years without him. Yeah, I replied quietly. It's been a while. That should have been the end of it. A polite exchange. A clean exit. But Dominic didn't move. Didn't look away. His gaze dropped briefly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but I felt it like a weight. Calculating. Noticing. Remembering. You have a child now, he said, more statement than question. I nodded once. I do. Silence stretched between us, thin and dangerous. Then, before I could step back, before I could put distance where it belonged, his hand found my waist. Firm. Familiar. Like no time had passed at all. My breath hitched, my body reacting before my thoughts could catch up. You moved on fast, he murmured, close enough now that I could feel the warmth of his voice near my ear. My pulse spiked. People do that, I said, forcing steadiness into my tone. They move on. His grip didn't tighten, but it didn't loosen either. If anything, it anchored me in place. Do they? He asked softly. I turned my head just enough to meet his eyes again, and that was my mistake. Because whatever calm mask he was wearing, there was something underneath it, something I remembered all too well. Not anger. Not exactly. Something deeper. Let go, I said under my breath. For a second, I thought he might not. Then, just as suddenly as it came, the pressure disappeared. Dominic stepped back, his expression smoothing into something polite, almost indifferent, as he reached for a glass from a passing tray. Just a joke, he said lightly, raising it in a casual gesture. Don't mind me. A joke. Right. I nodded, because that was what I was supposed to do. Because that was the role I had chosen when I walked back into this city. But as I turned away, as I forced myself to walk toward the exit without looking back, I could still feel it. That gaze, steady and unrelenting, following me like something unfinished. And deep down I knew, this wasn't over. Not even close. I should have left the moment I stepped out of that ballroom. But the truth is, I had already made my first mistake the second I came back to this city. Because coming back meant stepping into a past I never truly escaped, and Dominic Viral was always at the center of it. 3 years ago, before everything fell apart, I was just another invisible face in a place that thrived on people like me. The bar was dim, expensive, and filled with people who never had to think twice about money. I was there because I had no other choice. My mother was in the hospital, her condition getting worse by the day, and the bills kept stacking up like a countdown I could not stop. I remember that night clearly because it was the first time I realized how small I was compared to the world I had stepped into. Table 9, my manager said, pushing a tray into my hands. And be careful. Those are important people. Important. That was the word they always used for men like Dominic. I did not know his name yet, but I noticed him immediately. Not because he was loud or flashy, but because he was the opposite. He sat there, calm, composed, like everything around him existed on his terms. While everyone else laughed too loudly and talked too much, he barely spoke, his gaze distant, almost bored. I should have kept my head down. I should have done my job and walked away. But when I placed the glass in front of him, he looked up. And just like that, I felt it. Not fear. Not exactly. Something sharper. Like being seen too clearly. "What is your name?" he asked. His voice was low, controlled, carrying an authority that made it impossible to ignore. I hesitated for half a second before answering. "Eric's." He repeated it once, like he was testing how it sounded. "Eric's." Then he leaned back slightly, studying me in a way that made my grip tighten around the tray. "Do you work here by choice?" The question caught me off guard. No one asked things like that. Not in places like this. "Does it matter?" I replied quietly, before I could stop myself. For a moment, the table went silent. I thought I had made a mistake. But then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth lifted just slightly. Not a smile. Something more subtle. "It does," he said. "Because I am about to offer you a different option." My heart skipped, not out of excitement, but because I already knew what he meant. I had seen it happen before. Men like him did not ask. They chose. "I am not interested," I said quickly, lowering my gaze, trying to end it before it even started. But Dominic did not react the way others would have. He did not get offended. Did not push. He simply reached into his jacket, pulled out a card, and placed it on the table between us. "Take it," he said calmly. "Think about it." I should have walked away and forgotten about it. I wanted to. But that night, when I returned to the hospital and saw my mother lying there, her breathing uneven, her hands so thin they barely felt real, something inside me broke. The doctor did not say much, but he did not need to. I understood. Time was running out. I stood outside the hospital for a long time, staring at that card in my hand. Dominic Viral. Even the name felt heavy. Dangerous. Final. I told myself I still had a choice. That I could find another way. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The next evening, I called the number. He picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering how long it would take," he said, like he had been expecting this all along. I closed my eyes for a second, gripping the phone tighter. "What do you want from me?" There was a pause. Then, simply, "Your time. Your presence." Nothing more complicated than that. Nothing more. It sounded simple. It was not. "And in return?" I asked. His answer came without hesitation. "Everything you need." I should have asked more questions. I should have thought about the consequences. But all I could see was my mother, and the reality I could not escape. So I made the decision that changed everything. "Fine," I said quietly. "I accept." I told myself it was just an arrangement, something temporary, something I could walk away from the moment I no longer needed it. But the truth is, nothing about Dominic Viral was ever simple. The first night I stepped into his world, everything felt unreal. The apartment alone was larger than the entire building I used to live in, glass walls stretching from floor to ceiling, overlooking a city that never seemed to sleep. I remember standing near the entrance, unsure if I was supposed to move, breathe, or even speak. "You can relax," Dominic said from behind me, his voice calm as ever. "You look like you are about to run." I let out a quiet breath, forcing myself to turn. "I am just trying to understand what I agreed to." He studied me for a moment, then walked past me, setting his keys down with a soft click. "You agreed to stay," he said simply. "That is all." It sounded easy when he said it like that. It was not. At first, I expected demands, rules, something that would make it clear where I stood. But Dominic never gave me any of that. He did not tell me what to wear, where to go, or how to act. He did not even question me when I left early in the mornings to visit my mother. Instead, he made everything effortless. Money appeared when I needed it. The hospital bills were handled before I even had the chance to ask. It was as if he had already anticipated every problem I could face and removed it before it could reach me. "Why are you doing this?" I asked him once, late at night, when the city lights reflected off the glass and the silence between us felt heavier than usual. He did not look up from his phone. "Does it matter?" he replied. I hesitated, then shook my head slightly. "No," I admitted. Because it did not. Not when my mother was getting better. Not when I could finally breathe without feeling like everything was collapsing around me. And yet, somewhere along the way, things started to change. It was not sudden. It never is. It was in the small moments. The way he would pause when I spoke, actually listening instead of dismissing me. The way he would sit closer than necessary, not touching, but close enough that I could feel his presence without looking. The way he remembered things I never thought were important. "You skipped lunch," he said one afternoon, setting a plate in front of me without explanation. I blinked, surprised. "How do you know that?" He gave me a brief glance. "You always get quiet when you do." It was little things like that. Things that made it harder to keep my distance. Harder to remind myself what this really was. 3 months turned into 6. 6 turned into a year. And somehow, I was still there. I should have left when my mother passed. That was the original plan. That was the agreement I made with myself. But when the time came, I could not. Because by then, Dominic was no longer just a solution to my problems. He had become something else. Something dangerous. You can go if you want, he told me once. Out of nowhere, his tone neutral as always. I froze for a second, not expecting it. What? He leaned back slightly, watching me with that same unreadable expression. Your situation is stable now. You do not need me anymore. The words should have felt like freedom. Instead, they felt like something closing. And you? I asked before I could stop myself. Do you need me? There was a pause. Just long enough to make my chest tighten. Then he looked away. No, he said. Just one word. Calm. Certain. And that was the moment I understood everything. Whatever this was between us, it only mattered to me. I nodded slowly, forcing a small smile. Then I guess that makes things simple. But it was not simple. Because that night, for the first time, I realized I was already in too deep. I should have left when he gave me the chance. But life does not fall apart all at once. It unravels quietly, one truth at a time, until there is nothing left to hold on to. My mother's condition worsened faster than anyone expected, and no matter how much money Dominic spent, no matter how many specialists were brought in, there were some things even power could not fix. I remember sitting beside her hospital bed, holding her hand as the machines filled the room with a steady, artificial rhythm. You should not stay here all the time, she whispered weakly, her voice barely audible. You look tired. I forced a smile, tightening my grip on her fingers. I am fine. You just need to get better. But we both knew that was not going to happen. The night she passed, everything went silent in a way I had never experienced before. No dramatic moment, no final words, just a quiet absence that settled into my bones. I did not cry right away. I just sat there, staring, trying to understand how the world could keep moving when mine had just stopped. Dominic came later. He did not say much. He stood beside me, his presence steady, controlled, like always. We will handle everything, he said. Now we will get through this. Not I am here for you. Just we will handle it. Practical. Distant. And somehow, that made it worse. The days that followed blurred together. Arrangements, paperwork, conversations I barely remembered having. And then, just when I thought I had nothing left to lose, I heard it. Did you hear? Selim Voss is coming back. The words were spoken casually, like it was just another piece of gossip, but they hit me harder than anything else. Selim Voss. The name I had heard so many times, always tied to Dominic, always spoken with a kind of certainty that made it feel real. The one person Dominic had never denied. The one person I could never compete with. I did not ask Dominic about it. I did not need to. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The distance. The restraint. The way he never crossed that invisible line between us. I was never meant to be anything more than a placeholder. That night, I stood alone in the apartment, the city lights stretching endlessly outside the window, and for the first time, it did not feel like a place I belonged. My hand rested unconsciously against my stomach, a habit I had not fully understood until recently. The doctor's words echoed in my mind, over and over. You are pregnant. I closed my eyes, my breath unsteady. This is bad timing, I whispered to myself, but even as I said it, I knew it was more than that. It was impossible, complicated, something that could destroy everything if I made the wrong choice. I thought about telling him. I really did. But every time I imagined it, I saw the same outcome. Dominic looking at me with that calm, distant expression, asking one simple question. Is it mine? And even if the answer was yes, what would that change? Nothing. Because I already knew where I stood. By the time Selim returned, there would be no place left for me. I let out a slow breath, opening my eyes. You have to leave, I told myself quietly. And once I said it out loud, it became real. The next morning, I packed a single suitcase. I did not take much. Just the essentials. I left everything else behind, including the life I had built over the past 3 years. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment, my hand resting on the handle. Part of me expected him to appear, to stop me, to say something that would change my mind. But he did not. Of course he did not. So I opened the door and walked out, not looking back. Because if I did, I knew I would not have the strength to leave. 3 years sounds like a long time until you are the one living through every single day of it alone. counting time not in months, but in survival. I did not go somewhere far or dramatic when I left, just another city where no one knew my name, where I could disappear without questions. At first, everything was quiet. Too quiet. I rented a small apartment barely big enough for a bed and a table, telling myself it was temporary, that I just needed time to figure things out. But time does not fix anything when reality keeps catching up to you. The pregnancy was not easy. There were days I could not get out of bed, days I questioned every decision I had made, but every time I thought about giving up, I remembered why I left in the first place. You have to be okay, I whispered more than once, my hand resting over my stomach. I am all you have. When Lyra was born, everything changed in a way I was not prepared for. Asked one doctor, my voice steadier than I felt. He hesitated just long enough for me to notice. We will do everything we can, he said carefully. That was not the answer I wanted. That was not the answer I needed. The bills started piling up again, faster this time, heavier. Everything I had saved began to disappear, piece by piece, until I was left staring at numbers that did not make sense anymore. I worked more, slept less, pushed myself further than I thought I could go, but it was not enough. It was never enough. One night, after putting Lyra to bed, I sat on the floor with the bills spread out in front of me, my hands shaking slightly as I tried to calculate what was left. I cannot do this, I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Because for the first time in 3 years, I was not sure I could keep going on my own. And that was when the thought came back. The one I had buried the moment I left. Dominic. I shook my head immediately, pushing it away. No, I said out loud, like saying it would make it true. I am not going back. But the truth does not care about pride. It does not care about fear or past decisions. It only cares about what you are willing to lose. I looked toward the bedroom, where Lyra was sleeping peacefully, unaware of everything that was about to change. My chest tightened painfully. I will not let anything happen to you, I said softly. And this time, the words felt different. Because I knew what they meant. The next morning, I booked a flight. Not because I wanted to go back, but because I had no other choice. The moment I stepped back into the city, I knew something felt wrong, not in a loud or obvious way, but in the quiet, suffocating sense that I was being watched, like the past I tried so hard to escape had already noticed my return. I told myself I was imagining things, that stress and exhaustion were finally catching up to me, but the feeling did not go away. It followed me through crowded streets, lingered in reflections I caught in passing windows, and settled deep in my chest every time I thought about why I had come back. Just get through this, I whispered to myself more than once, gripping Lyra's small hand a little tighter as we walked. You just need help. That is all. But nothing about this felt simple anymore. The first few days passed quietly. Too quietly. I avoided places I knew he might be, kept my head down, focused only on what mattered. Doctors. Appointments. Costs. Always costs. Every conversation ended the same way, with numbers that felt heavier each time I heard them. We recommend starting treatment as soon as possible, the doctor said, his tone careful, measured. The earlier we act, the better her chances. I nodded, even though my mind was already racing ahead. How much time do I have? I asked. He paused, then answered honestly. Not as much as you would like. That night, I barely slept. Lyra was curled up beside me, her breathing soft and steady, completely unaware of the storm building around us. I brushed her hair back gently, my chest tightening. I am going to fix this, I murmured. I promise. But promises do not mean anything without a way to keep them. The next morning, I started reaching out, calling anyone I thought might help, anyone who might offer even a small chance. Most did not answer. The few who did gave polite refusals wrapped in careful words. By the end of the day, I was running out of options. And that was when the message came. Unknown number. No name. No explanation. Just one line. If you want to save your child, come alone. I stared at the screen, my grip tightening around the phone. This is a mistake, I muttered under my breath, but I did not delete it. I read it again. And again. It did not feel random. It felt intentional. Targeted. Like someone knew exactly what I needed and exactly how to use it against me. I should have ignored it. I knew that. Every instinct I had told me to walk away, to protect what little stability I had left. But then I looked at Lyra, sitting quietly on the floor, playing with a toy that had long since lost its color, and something inside me broke again. I do not have a choice, I whispered. That evening, I dropped her off at a neighbor's place, forcing a calm smile I did not feel. I will be back soon. I told her, kneeling down to meet her eyes. Be good, okay? She nodded, trusting me without hesitation. Okay, Papa. I swallowed hard, standing up before she could see the hesitation in my expression. Because if I stayed any longer, I might not leave at all. The location was not far, just outside the main part of the city, quiet enough that no one would pay attention, isolated enough that anything could happen without witnesses. As I approached, the unease in my chest grew stronger. This was not right. Nothing about this was right. I stopped a few feet from the entrance, my hand hovering in the air as doubt crept in. You can still turn back, I told myself. But I did not. Because turning back meant giving up. And I was not ready to do that. Not when everything was on the line. So I took a breath, steadied myself, and stepped forward, not knowing that this single decision was about to change everything all over again. The moment I stepped inside, the door behind me closed with a soft click that echoed louder than it should have, and that was when I knew I had made a mistake. The space was dim, empty, and far too quiet, the kind of quiet that does not feel natural, like it was waiting for something to happen. I stopped walking, my instincts screaming at me to turn around, but it was too late for that. You actually came. The voice came from the shadows ahead, familiar in a way that made my chest tighten instantly. I did not need to see him clearly to recognize who it was. Selim, I said slowly, forcing my voice to stay steady even as my pulse started to race. He stepped forward just enough for the light to catch his face, a faint smile playing at his lips, but there was nothing warm about it. I was not sure you would, he continued, tilting his head slightly as he looked at me, like he was examining something he had only heard about before. But I guess when it comes to your child, you are predictable. My hands clenched at my sides. You said you could help, I replied, getting straight to the point. Where is the money? He laughed softly, like I had just said something amusing. Straight to business, he said. I like that. Then his expression shifted, just slightly, the amusement fading into something sharper. But tell me something first, he added, taking a step closer. Does Dominic know? My breath caught for half a second before I forced myself to answer. This has nothing to do with him. Everything about you has something to do with him, Selim said calmly, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. I shook my head. I did not come here to talk about that, I said firmly. You said you could help my child. That is all that matters. For a moment, he just looked at me, silent, thoughtful. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled something out, holding it loosely between his fingers. A check. My chest tightened. This is what you want, right? He said, his voice almost casual. Enough to solve your problem. I took a step forward without thinking. Give it to me. He did not move. It is not that simple, he replied. Of course it was not. Nothing ever was. What do you want? I asked, my voice quieter now, more careful. His smile returned, slower this time. Just a small thing, he said. I want to understand something. I frowned slightly. Understand what? He took another step closer, close enough that I could see the shift in his expression clearly now, the way his eyes sharpened with something I could not quite name. Why am he asked? The question caught me off guard. What? Dominic, he clarified. Out of everyone, why did he choose you? I stared at him, unsure how to respond. That does not matter, I said finally. It is over. Is it? He asked softly. The way he said it made something cold settle in my chest. Because suddenly, this did not feel like a simple exchange anymore. It felt like something else entirely. Something I had walked into without understanding. I took a step back, my instincts kicking in again. If you are not going to help, I am leaving, I said, turning slightly toward the door. I would not do that if I were you. The calm certainty in his voice stopped me. I hesitated, just for a second. And that was enough. Because in that moment, I realized something I should have understood from the beginning. This was never about helping me. This was about something else. Something I had just become a part of. And whatever it was, I was already too far inside to walk away easily. My instincts were screaming at me to leave, but my feet would not move, like something invisible had already locked me into place. Selim watched me carefully, as if he was waiting for something, not rushing, not forcing, just observing in a way that made the silence heavier with every second. You look like you finally understand, he said softly, tilting his head slightly. I clenched my jaw. Understand what? I asked, even though part of me already knew the answer would not be simple. He let out a quiet breath, almost amused. That you were never supposed to come back, he replied. My chest tightened. Then why bring me here? I shot back. If this is not about helping, then what do you want? He did not answer right away. Instead, he looked at me like I was a puzzle he had spent years trying to solve. Do you know what the most frustrating thing is? He said after a moment. It is not losing. It is not being ignored. It is watching someone choose something else and not understanding why. I frowned slightly. I do not know what you are talking about. Of course you do, he said, his voice lowering just enough to send a chill down my spine. You just do not want to admit it. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. If you have something to say, just say it. For a second, his expression shifted, something sharper breaking through the calm surface he had been maintaining. Fine, he said. I want to know why he chose you. The question landed heavier this time. Not curious. Not casual. Something else. That has nothing to do with now. I replied, keeping my voice steady. Give me the check, and I will leave. That is what you promised. He looked down at the check in his hand, then back at me. You still think this is about money, he said quietly. That is interesting. My patience started to crack. Then stop wasting my time, I said. I do not care about whatever issue you have with him. I am here for my child. The moment the words left my mouth, something changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. The way his eyes narrowed slightly, the way his posture straightened, like he had just confirmed something important. Your child, he repeated slowly. My pulse spiked. I had said too much. Yes, I replied quickly. That is why I am here. He studied me for a long moment, silent, calculating. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled again. But this time, there was no softness in it at all. You really think he does not know? He asked. The question hit me harder than anything else he had said. Know what? I asked, my voice quieter now. He took a step closer, just enough to close the distance I had tried to create earlier. You, he said. Your child. Your life for the past 3 years. My mind went blank for a second. That is not possible, I said immediately, shaking my head. I left. There is no way there is no way. Selim cut in, his tone almost amused again. You still do not understand who you are dealing with. I felt my breath catch, something cold spreading through my chest. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Dominic was not the kind of person who lost track of things that mattered to him. And that thought, it changed everything. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely steady now. He shrugged slightly. Because I wanted to see your reaction, he said. And now I have. I stared at him, my thoughts racing, trying to piece together something that made sense. But nothing did. Nothing fit. And that was when the sound broke through the tension. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Familiar. My entire body went still. Selim's expression shifted again, this time with something that almost looked like anticipation. Right on time, he murmured. I did not need to turn around to know who had just walked in. Because I could feel it. That presence. That weight in the air. And in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. This was never just about Selim. And I had just walked straight into something much bigger than I was prepared for. The moment I turned around, everything inside me stopped, like time had been cut clean in half. Dominic stood there, exactly where I had hoped he would never be again, exactly where I had always known he would be if things went wrong. He did not rush forward. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, his gaze fixed on me, calm in a way that felt far more dangerous than anything else. So this is where you ran off to, he said quietly. My throat tightened instantly. I did not run, I replied, even though the words felt weak the moment they left my mouth. His eyes flickered slightly, like he was measuring something I could not see. No, he asked. Then what would you call disappearing without a word for 3 years? I did not answer, because there was no answer that would not sound like an excuse. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until Selim let out a soft laugh behind me. This is interesting, he said casually. I was wondering how long it would take you to show up. Dominic did not look at him, not even for a second. Leave, he said, his tone flat, final. Selim raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. You think you can just walk in and take control like nothing has changed, he asked. Still, Dominic did not react. His attention never left me. I said leave. He repeated, just as calm, just as certain. Something in the air shifted again, and this time even Selim seemed to recognize it. The tension did not explode. It did not need to. After a brief pause, he exhaled lightly and stepped back. Fine, he said. I got what I wanted anyway. His gaze flicked toward me one last time, sharp and knowing. You should ask him the right questions, he added before turning away. And just like that, he was gone. The space felt different without him, but not lighter. If anything, it felt heavier, like everything that had been building was now left between just the two of us. I forced myself to breathe, but it did not help. Did you know? I asked suddenly, my voice quieter than I intended. Dominic did not hesitate. Yes. The answer hit me harder than anything else. Since when? I pressed, my hands tightening at my sides. Since before you left, he replied. My mind went blank. That is not possible, I said, shaking my head. I never told you. You did not have to, he said calmly. I stared at him, trying to understand, trying to find something in his expression that made sense. Then why? I asked, my voice cracking slightly despite my effort to control it. Why did you let me go? For the first time since he walked in, something in his expression changed. Not much, just enough for me to notice. Because you wanted to leave, he said. And because it was the only way to keep you out of what was happening here. I let out a hollow breath, disbelief mixing with something far more complicated. You think that makes it better? I asked, knowing you could have said something, that you could have stopped me. He did not answer right away. Instead, he took a step closer, slow and deliberate, giving me enough time to move away if I wanted to. I did not. I could have, he admitted finally. But then you would have stayed. And if you stayed, you would not have been safe. The words settled between us, heavier than anything else he had said. I searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for anything that would make this easier to reject. But there was none. Just certainty. Just truth. And that made it worse. So what now? I asked, my voice barely steady. He did not hesitate this time. Now I fix what I should have fixed 3 years ago, he said. My chest tightened. You cannot just decide that, I replied. You cannot walk back into my life and act like nothing happened. I am not acting like nothing happened, he said. I am saying I am here now. And I am not leaving. The words hung in the air, solid and unshakable. And for the first time in 3 years, I did not know what to do with that. Because part of me still wanted to walk away. But another part of me, the part one had tried to bury, was no longer sure I could.